Hi, my name is Patrick Shepard. I'm going to be speaking about the opioid epidemic today. This is an issue that has been plaguing our country and in recent years has reached epidemic proportions. I will demonstrate in this slideshow current research that unequivocally presents evidence that illustrates our current problem facing our country. This article was published on November 30th, 2017, and that first line is pretty striking to me. More than 90 Americans die every day after overdosing on opioids. This slide is talking about the strength of opioids. So in 1999, MME, or morphine milligram equivalents, which is a way to calculate the total amount of opioids accounting for the differences in opioid type and strength. The MME prescribed per person in 2015 was about 3 times as high as in 1999. 3 out of 4 people who used heroin in the past year misused opioids first, and 7 out of 10 people who used heroin in the past year also misused opioids in the past year. This is also just showing that it's impacting our families too, especially children. Who's at risk? This is according to the CDC. You can see the demographics, socioeconomics, and geography, and the risk factors. This slide here, you can see on the left where heroin and fentanyl in the years about 2010 to 2011-12, there's that huge increase right there, and that's that tipping point right there. In 2000 now, this is just a map. You can see it's the estimated age-adjusted death rate per 100,000 people. Now the 2 red dots, that's greater than 30. Now when we go to 2005, you can see the map becomes those lighter colors, a little bit more red. 2010, even more so. And then now 2015, now you can see that epidemic proportion right there. This slide here is speaking about the amount of opioids prescribed per person varied widely among counties in 2015. Those dark colors are the worst off. You can see the drastic component of it. The next slide here, this is just showing the effects on the body, which is pretty, it affects the central nervous system, pretty much all the systems within the body. Now this is just another graphic kind of showing that increase in heroin, especially in fentanyl and heroin around that 2010-2011 year mark. Now this is the first wave, and you can see that it has risen pretty drastically, and that's these 2 lines here. Then now as you go on further here, overdose death rates rose in lockstep with opioid prescribing. And then now that second wave, you can kind of see that heroin death rate has increased, and it is really getting up there. Now looking at the social ecological model. The opioid epidemic and the social ecological model follows many of the same concepts of anything else that's applied to this model. Individual level can learn more about prevention, treatment, safety, and the basic knowledge of opioids and the effects on the body. The interpersonal looks at the providers, family, peers, and social networks to get involved, possibly an intervention in being a basic support system. Organizational is looking a little broader at the community-based organization, clinics, workplaces, and where places can have screenings, promote health and wellness, and also be supportive. The community, even broader, looking at the media, coalitions, research institutions, the community, state, regional advocacy organizations. Policy, as it sounds, is the federal, state, and local levels that can create policies that don't hinder the treatment and prevention of opioid addiction. Social determinants of health, this is just a definition here. Continuing on, this is kind of going more into the social determinants of health. It draws upon research relating to human development and the social determinants of health. We have described multiple environmental factors that might contribute to the problematic drug use. For example, Western culture attitudes, income inequality, social capital, and housing quality. Social determinants of health. This is looking at they fall into 2 broad categories, according to Sibthorpe and Dixon: barriers to policy action and limited impact to actions that have been taken. The health disparities. This was pretty. With this article, there showed implicit bias appears to play a role in these outcomes, most blatantly evident in the fact that African Americans and Hispanics were significantly less likely to receive opioids when a cause of pain could not be readily verified. Continued, CDC taking opioids for long periods of time over higher doses increases the risk of addiction, overdose, and death. In 2015, 6 times more opioids per resident were dispensed in the highest prescribing countries than in the lowest prescribing countries. counties, excuse me. Prevention. This is looking at Vermont. Vermont brought the challenge of opioid addiction to the national attention in 2014 and took action to enhance prevention, promote screening, early intervention monitoring, monitor prescribing, expand treatment, and support recovery. More states need to be implementing this, and I think they are. Now, what can be done? This is looking at the federal government level. Then it goes to the state level. This is all according to the CDC. Now, what healthcare providers can do. Now, this is according to the CDC. Their guidelines for prescribing opioids for chronic pain, which includes recommendations such as use opioids only when benefits are likely to outweigh the risks. Start with the lowest effective dose of immediate release opioids. For acute pain, prescribe only the number of days that pain is expected to be severe enough to require opioids. Reassess benefits and risks if considering the dose increases. Now, everyone can. Now, I think this is very important. Consider non-opioid options for pain management. Store prescription opioids in a secure place out of reach of others. Dispose of medications properly. If you need help, there's hotlines. There's so many options out there nowadays. Now, getting to the tipping point with Malcolm Gladwell. What has caused the opioid epidemic to tip in the United States? This is just a few of my own opinions and thoughts. More and more people are prescribed opioids that were stronger, more addictive. Once their prescription ran out, people seek legal means of obtaining prescription drugs. Also, heroin is cheaper alternative, stronger, and more addictive. Now, fentanyl is wreaking havoc and is highly more addictive, potent, and deadly. Research shows from the late 1990s until now, there's been a steady and overwhelming trend that shows more deaths from opioid overdose. I related this to the law of the few. Gladwell states the success of any kind of social epidemic is heavily dependent on the involvement of people with a particular rare set of social gifts. Then I connected it or used those three, the connectors, mavens, and salesmen as part of the law of the few. Now using the lessons learned from the tipping point. People can bring old medications so there's less unused opioids available. State can provide free kits for self-destruction of opioids to make them less available. Safe places for people to use clean needles and sterile products to limit the spread of infectious diseases. Education to providers on overall prescription of opioids to patients and how to recommend alternatives, i.e. physical therapy, non-opioid medications. There's the promotion of community initiative for no questions asked returns of drugs and paraphernalia without conviction. There needs to be more faith community leaders, boys and girls clubs, YMCA, patient advocates, the list goes on. Knowing is half the battle. These are all the websites that I used for my presentation, and they are very informative for anyone. And furthermore, these are my references that I used. And kind of just going back and forth through a lot of the information here that I gathered. It was very important to me that it really encompassed the issue from what we can do on a local level, community and individual, that you're not alone out there, and that everyone's going to need help, and it is a disease. It's not, they're not, yes, they can commit crimes and they become criminals, yes, but it's more than that, and we need to treat these people with the dignity and respect that they deserve and stop this epidemic before it worsens and becomes more of a problem. It has tipped to the point where we need to start that trend downwards. We need to use those lessons that we've learned from the tipping point to create and use the law of the few, where the connectors and the mavens and the salesmen can have that. The connectors are, essentially the social equivalent of a network hub. Gladwell attributes the social success of connectors to the fact that their ability to span many different worlds as a function of something intrinsic to their personality, some combination of curiosity, self-confidence, sociability, and energy. Mavens, they accumulate knowledge, especially about marketplace, and know how to share it with others. Salesmen, Gladwell states, are persuaders. They're charismatic people with powerful negotiation skills. They tend to have an indefinable trait that goes beyond what they say, which makes others want to agree with them. All these people need to come together and create such a much more help.